Welcome to our deep dive into the myth of Medusa. We'll be using excerpts from her Wikipedia page to uncover fascinating details about this infamous figure, from Greek mythology. So who was she? Where did she come from? And why is her image still so powerful today?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Medusa's story has resonated through the centuries, inspiring artists and writers, even scientists. There's a depth to her myth that goes far beyond, the surface level of a snake-haired monster.
Right. I mean, everyone knows the basics. Woman with snakes for hair turns people to stone. But what I find really intriguing is that there are so many different versions of her story,
Yeah.
and they often contradict each other.
Exactly. That's one of the most captivating aspects of studying mythology. These stories aren't static. They evolve and change over time, reflecting the beliefs and anxieties of the cultures that retell them. Take Medusa's origins, for example.
Okay, let's unpack that. Was she always a monster? Or is there more to the story?
Well, the earliest depictions we have, like those found on ancient Greek pottery, do tend to portray her as a monstrous figure. But what's fascinating is that around the 5th century BC, a shift occurs in Greek art. Medusa starts to be portrayed as both beautiful and terrifying.
So this idea of her being a beautiful woman cursed into a monstrous form existed before the Roman poet Ovid popularized it.
It did, and that's a crucial detail because it challenges the traditional narrative. Ovid's version, where Medusa is punished by Minerva for being raped by Neptune in her temple, is compelling, no doubt. But the fact that ancient art already depicted her as both beautiful and monstrous suggests a deeper, more complex understanding of her character, even before Ovid's retelling.
It's like there's this whole hidden layer to her story that we're only just beginning to uncover.
Precisely, and this is where it gets even more interesting. Because if Medusa wasn't always a monster, if she was once a beautiful woman, it raises questions about who she really was and what her story truly represents.
So she's not just a monster, she's a symbol. But a symbol of what?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And as we'll see, there are many different ways to interpret her symbolism.
Okay, well, let's delve into those interpretations. I'm particularly interested in the feminist perspective. How do feminist scholars view Medusa?
Feminist scholars have reclaimed Medusa's image, viewing her not as a monstrous figure to be feared, but as a victim of patriarchal injustice. They see her punishment, the transformation into a Gorgon, as a reflection of how women are often blamed and punished for the actions of men.
It's almost as if her story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of silencing women and dismissing their experiences.
Exactly. And this resonates particularly strongly in the context of modern movements like #MeToo, which have brought to light the prevalence of sexual assault and the systemic silencing of victims.
It's incredible how a myth from ancient Greece can still hold such relevance today. But let's not forget about Perseus, the hero who slays Medusa.
Yes, the Perseus narrative is often central to retellings of Medusa's story. He's tasked with bringing back her head, a seemingly impossible feat. However, he receives divine assistance, particularly the mirrored shield from Athena.
That mirrored shield is key, right? It allows him to defeat Medusa without looking directly at her.
Exactly. It represents strategy and intellect triumphing over brute force. It's a reminder that even the most formidable challenges can be overcome with cleverness and a bit of help from unexpected sources.
And of course, when Perseus beheads Medusa, Pegasus and Chrysaor spring from her severed neck.
Yes, the birth of Pegasus, the winged horse, is a particularly poignant detail. It suggests that even in death, even in the most brutal of circumstances, there's a potential for beauty and transcendence.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. It's like, even in tragedy, there's hope. But I have a feeling that's just one layer of interpretation when it comes to Medusa's death and the events that follow.
You're absolutely right. And those interpretations are what we'll be diving into next. Welcome back to our deep dive into the myth of Medusa. Before we move on, I want to circle back to something you said earlier that really struck me. You mentioned how Medusa's story feels relevant to modern movements like #MeToo.
Yeah, it's almost impossible not to draw parallels.
Yeah.
The idea of a woman being punished for something she didn't do, her voice being silenced, it resonates deeply with the experiences of so many women throughout history and even today.
And that connection to contemporary issues is what makes these ancient myths so fascinating and enduring. They offer a lens through which we can examine our own beliefs and societal structures. But let's shift gears for a moment and explore another intriguing interpretation of Medusa's myth, one that delves into the realm of nihilism.
Nihilism, as in life is meaningless, nihilism.
Yeah.
How does that fit in with the story of a snake-haired Gorgon?
It might seem like a stretch at first, but consider Medusa's gaze. It turns people to stone, effectively ending their existence as they know it.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Her gaze could be seen as a metaphor for the cold, indifferent nature of reality itself. The universe doesn't care about our hopes or dreams. It simply exists.
Exactly. Some scholars and artists have interpreted Medusa as a representation of that stark, uncaring reality. For example, the writer Jack London used Medusa in this way, in his novel The Mutiny of the Elsinore.
So, in a way, facing Medusa in this interpretation means confronting the truth, no matter how harsh or unsettling it may be.
That's a powerful way to put it. It suggests that our myths, even those that appear monstrous on the surface, can hold profound truths about the human condition. But perhaps the most enduring aspect of Medusa's legacy is her presence in art and culture.
Absolutely. We've touched on this a bit, but I'd love to hear more about how artists throughout history have interpreted and reimagined her image.
Her image is a recurring motif in art history, appearing in ancient Greek pottery, Roman mosaics, Renaissance paintings, and even modern sculptures.
Wow. She's truly transcended time and artistic movements. Are there any specific pieces that stand out as particularly noteworthy?
Caravaggio's Medusa, from the late 16th century, is a chillingly realistic depiction of her severed head, complete with blood dripping from her neck and snakes writhing in her hair. It's a visceral and haunting image that captures the sheer terror associated with her myth.
Intense. It sounds like Caravaggio leaned into the more monstrous aspects of her character.
He did, but there are also works that take a different approach. Peter Paul Rubens' Head of Medusa, for instance, offers a more allegorical interpretation. He uses her image to symbolize the triumph of virtue over evil.
So she's not always depicted as a fearsome monster. There's nuance to how artists have portrayed her.
Absolutely. Even when she's shown as fearsome, there's often an element of tragedy or complexity. It's as if artists are grappling with the different facets of her myth, just as scholars are. But it's not just about full-blown depictions of Medusa. Her iconic head, often called the Gorgonian, has also been used as a protective symbol throughout history.
Like a good luck charm.
Yes, the idea was that her fearsome visage would ward off evil spirits and protect the wearer from harm. You can still find Medusa's image on jewelry, clothing, tattoos, and even logos today.
It's amazing how a figure from ancient myth continues to hold such a powerful grip on our collective imagination.
And it's a testament to the enduring power of storytelling. Myths like Medusa's aren't just ancient tales. They're reflections of our deepest fears, desires, and the complexities of human experience. Speaking of which, there's one final area we should explore before wrapping up our deep dive. We mentioned it briefly before, but it deserves a closer look.
You're talking about the science of Medusa, right? Those species named after her.
Exactly. Even the scientific world hasn't been immune to her allure. Her name has been used to classify various species in different fields, highlighting the intersection between mythology and our quest to understand the natural world.
So besides the jellyfish, what other creatures have been named after Medusa? I'm picturing some pretty intimidating critters.
The list is surprisingly diverse. We have a species of blennyfish called Medusa blennius, which, true to its name, has Medusa-like tentacles around its eyes.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Any others?
There's a type of horned dinosaur called Medusa ceratops with a frill of bony projections that might have reminded paleontologists of Medusa's snake hair.
Wow, a dinosaur named after Medusa. That's incredible. It seems her legacy truly extends from the depths of the ocean to the prehistoric past.
It does, and it speaks to the interconnectedness of our knowledge. Myths, science, art, they all contribute to our understanding of the world and ourselves.
I'm starting to think that Medusa's real power isn't petrification, but inspiration. She sparked countless interpretations, artistic creations, and even scientific discoveries.
That's a brilliant insight. Medusa's myth, like all great myths, is a wellspring of ideas, a catalyst for exploration and understanding, and that's something truly worth pondering. As we conclude our depth dive...
For a story about a monster, this has been a surprisingly uplifting journey. But before we get too carried away, I have a feeling you have one last thought-provoking question up your sleeve.
As always, you know me too well. So, considering all the various interpretations of Medusa we've explored, which one resonates most strongly with you, and why?
That is a tough question. We've covered so much ground today, from ancient history to feminist theory, to even nihilism. It's hard to pick just one interpretation.
Well, it's not about choosing the right interpretation, but rather finding the one that speaks to you on a personal level. Which aspect of Medusa's story resonates most deeply with your own experiences and worldview?
You're right. It's more about connecting with the myth in a way that feels meaningful. And for me, I think the interpretation that resonates most strongly is the idea of Medusa as a symbol of transformation.
Transformation. That's an interesting take. Tell me more about what draws you to that perspective.
Well, we've talked about how Medusa's story has been reinterpreted throughout history. She's been seen as a monster, a victim, a symbol of female rage, and even a representation of the uncaring universe.
Yeah.
You know,
You've hit upon a key point. Her story has been fluid, constantly evolving and adapting to reflect the changing perspectives of different cultures and time periods.
exactly. And that fluidity, that ability to transform and take on new meanings is what fascinates me. It's like Medusa herself embodies the very concept of transformation, both literally, in her physical transformation into a Gorgon, and symbolically, in the way her myth has been transformed and reinterpreted over time.
That's a profound observation. It suggests that Medusa's story isn't static. It's a living, breathing narrative that continues to evolve as we do.
It also makes me think about the power of storytelling. Myths like Medusa's aren't just ancient tales. They're reflections of our deepest fears, desires, and the complexities of the human experience.
And they offer us a way to grapple with those complexities, to explore different perspectives, and to find meaning in a world that can often feel chaotic and unpredictable. So, what does this deep dive into the myth of Medusa leave you pondering? What new insights will you carry with you?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is the reminder that there's always more to learn, more to uncover, whether it's a historical event, a scientific discovery, or even an ancient myth. There are always multiple perspectives and interpretations waiting to be explored.
Well said. And that's the beauty of engaging with knowledge and ideas. It's an ongoing process of discovery, of questioning, and of challenging our own assumptions. And who knows, maybe our exploration of Medusa's myth will inspire you to look at other stories, other historical figures, with a fresh perspective, seeking those hidden layers and alternative interpretations.
I have a feeling this is just the beginning of my Medusa journey. I'm definitely going to be doing more research and exploring some of those amazing artworks we talked about.
That's fantastic. Remember, myths are like puzzles. Each piece, each interpretation adds to the bigger picture, but it's up to us to assemble those pieces and find the meaning that resonates most deeply with us.
And perhaps, in the process, we discover something new about ourselves and our place in the world.
Indeed. So, to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to continue the conversation, delve deeper into the myth of Medusa, explore her many facets, and discover the interpretations that speak to your own heart and mind.
Until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and
Yeah.
keep the conversation going.